Boxing King Media in association with Boxraw. Dom, it's been a while, it's been 2 months. A lot's happened in the last 2 months. I see you've lost a lot of weight, you've got a tan as well. Been anywhere nice?
I've been travelling around, visiting clients abroad. I've managed to fit in a holiday with the kids. It's the summer holidays, but you wouldn't think so with the weather. I've come back to permanent rain every day after spending 20 odd days in the sunshine. So it's refreshing, but I hope it doesn't last much longer.
Yeah, well, looks like you've had a pleasant couple of weeks away from boxing. Like I said, it's been a while since we spoke. And again, whenever I walk in, there's clients walking in and out of this gym that I remember seeing one of them that I saw today. He looked quite heavy literally 2 months ago, and he looks like he's lost a couple of stone. And I've also noticed he always sipping away with water. And you were telling him as well about you need to keep drinking water. What's all that about?
This is I'm not going to give the brand, but drinking water is really a health investment. So get the water and keep hydrated. It's one of people say to me, "Can you give me any free diet tips?" And I said, "I'm going to tell you this one, but you probably won't do it. Drink a minimum of 3 litres of water a day." And they look at you going out, and most people can't manage that. But just actually increasing your water intake every day has got massive health benefits that people don't realise.
I can vouch for that. You did tell me, and I think I lasted a couple of days. I couldn't do it. It's not easy. But with regards to, we always talk about the work that you're doing with people. We talked about it off camera, how, cardiovascular disease, which is a big killer in men. I think it's the biggest killer in men worldwide. And the stuff that you're doing can help counteract that.
It's known as the silent killer, CVD as they call it. And, I predominantly work with people over the age of 40. And it's usually the years of, between 40 and 50 where people get this, where their arteries are clogging up in the heart. And, it leads to a heart attack. So, the clients I get, really, it's not about looking like a bronze Adonis. It's more to do with, for health reasons, because people just don't keep it in check. You can get away with it while you're young. You can, live a hedonistic life, abuse yourself, drink, smoke. But when you get to 40, you've really got to pay attention to your health, because the next 10 years are probably going to determine whether you make it into, your late 50s and 60s, because a lot of people I know, probably a lot of people you know, they all start keeling over at 55, between 55 and 60. So you've really got to kind of keep your health in check, which is difficult these days because, life is so high pressured. You've never got, time to look after yourself. People are too busy working, earning money, getting on with life. And the last thing they consider is their own health.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And if anyone wants to improve their health and prevent heart disease, hit up Dominic Ingle on Instagram is the best way, I think.
Yeah, it's on Instagram, easily found. Search me up and we'll get moving.
Good stuff, Dom. Let's get to the boxing, which 99.9% of the people are here tuning in for. Breaking news today. We was going to speak at some point this week where you was going to do a prediction for AJ versus Whyte. But unfortunately, we got some news today that, Dillian Whyte, and I believe it's for the third time, has had found adverse findings in a doping test, and the fight's been called off. Your initial reaction to getting that news?
Well, you can ask me for my prediction, and it's like when you go on a betting site and you look who's going to win, who's going to lose. I think what they need to start incorporating now is fails a drug test and no contest, because it seems to be becoming, prevalent now. Eddie Hearn must be absolutely pulling his hair out, and he's got a good head of hair on him. But if he keeps going this way, he's going to end up bald like me. But it must be so frustrating because we've had it with Conor Ben. Big fight, and he failed the test. And now we've got Dillian Whyte for the third time failing a test in a big event against AJ, and everybody's looking forward to that. It wasn't the best fight out there, but I think people were interested for the fact that the careers since they first boxed have gone in different ways, and it's kind of interesting the meeting again. The paths are crossing again. How would that fight be? Because they were kind of raw novices in the beginning. So yeah, it's all up in the air again. Another VADA failed test. and their list is very, very comprehensive, and you know it's different to the World Anti-Doping Association list of banned substances. So you know, it could be something really bad like a steroid, it could be a stimulant, it could be a diuretic. There's a whole host of substances it could be where Dillian's concerned, but it's, you know, it is surprising, to be honest, because you very rarely see in boxing, you know, we had Tyson Fury had a failed test, we had Kid Galahad one failed test, we've had Amir Khan one failed test. You know, there's been other athletes and they've had a failed test, but Dillian Whyte has had 3.
Just to put some context on it, because I know there'll be people watching this thinking 3 tests, he needs banning for life, etc. But the context of that is, like, you know, looked into it. In 2012, when he was obviously found with an adverse finding, it was proven that it was a supplement that he bought over the counter, Jack 3D. I've got no idea what that is, but it's a nutritional stuff you can buy in a supplement store back in them days. He was given a 2-year ban. He appealed it, but that was up. You know, they kept the ban, but it wasn't a supplement over the counter. And then the second time when he was found with the failed test was in the Rivas fight, and I believe they said it was consistent with an isolated contamination event, so nothing came of that. So it's worth putting that out there.
That particular one was Dianabol, which is a bodybuilding drug, and you have to ask yourself the question, well, you know, how did that happen? Because if it was a common problem, there'd be a lot more athletes getting banned from it because it'd been supplements. So I never actually read up the report on that. I don't think I could even find it, but I remember when it happened, and he had a test. It was clean. A couple of days later, he had another test. He failed, and then he had another test a couple of days later, and he was clean. So what they kind of worked out from that is that it wasn't systematic doping. He wasn't on a doping program, and it was probably contamination. But just like we said with the first ban he got with a stimulant, it's if the drug's in your body, it's a doping offence anyway. And somewhere down the line, he must have proved that it was contamination. It was in a supplement that he took, and he could prove it was in the supplement, or it was in some food that he ate, and he could, you know, prove that it was in the food. So I never did read the report on that. I'm not sure it was actually ever out there for the public to view. It usually is with UCAD. So yeah, that was another case, and now we've got this recent one, and like I say, it could be anything from a stimulant to a diuretic. There's a whole host on VADA on their list what it could be, so it will be interesting to see what it is. You know, and it's just strange that it's the 3rd time with him.
He put a statement out this morning, and he basically put, I insisted on 24/7 VADA testing for this fight, and I assume with VADA it's voluntary, so the fighters pay for it. And from the past I've heard it's £20,000-30,000. A lot of money to pay to try and make sure nobody's taking steroids. So, you know, just the human factor and the common sense factor. Why would you pay that kind of money to then take steroids deliberately?
Well, let's say it's £30,000, and the programme for him and Anthony Joshua will be X amount of money. Let's even say it's £100,000. Well, how much are they getting for this fight? How much is Anthony Joshua getting? He's not getting £1 million.
Anthony Joshua?
Yeah.
I'd assume they're both getting a big 7-figure sum
Right,
each.
so they're getting seven figures. Each. Right, so 7 figures is what? Is over £10 million.
No, it's over £1 million.
All right, sorry. £1 million. So he's over £1 million. So Joshua's not getting, I'm talking about the 6 zeros. So Anthony Joshua's not getting £1 million. He's not getting £2 million. He's not getting £3 million. He's got to be getting above 5 million easily. And Dillian Whyte's got to be getting over £1 million, if not £2 million. So 30, 40, 50,000 pounds is a drop in the ocean just to ensure that Anthony Joshua's not taking drugs, or that Dillian Whyte's not taking drugs. And it's kind of the defence of, well, why would I pay for a drug test if I'm going to cheat? Well, you're actually doing that to make sure the other guy doesn't cheat. And it's going to be a drug test. There's not going to be a fight between Anthony Joshua and anybody else without a drug test. It's standard, whether you do it through. And even though they've paid for the VADA test, UCAD will still be testing them. because they're British fighters. So they might have paid for the voluntary anti-doping association test, which is VADA, but they're still getting tested by UCAD. So there's testing in place. It's just that VADA will be testing twice a week, and UCAD might be doing it every 2 or 3 weeks. So it's not really an excuse, or you can't really use that. It's a bit like when Conor Ben said, "Everybody knows me. You know, I don't do stuff like that." Well, that's that's no excuse, is it? Like, well, just because your personality dictates you won't do that, you're not a cheat, or you go to church and you're a respectful person, doesn't mean you're not going to take drugs, does it? So it's not really, relevant what Dillian said about, why would I pay for a test if I were going to cheat and get caught? But, we'll not know how that is until we get the results of what it is and all the ins and outs of it.
Definitely so. There's not a lot we can really say on that because, like you just said there, we don't know what drug it was, the circumstances around it, and obviously Dillian deserves a right to defend himself before, because we saw with Conor Ben how everyone kind of threw him under the bus before. We saw there was a lot of technicalities in the whole issue, but we will come on to Conor later on. Now the issue is the fight's cancelled. They're looking at replacements. The 3 names, there were 3 heavyweights on the card that are fighting that people I've suggested: Derek Chisora, Philip Hrgovic and Dempsey McKean. Chisora's had some criticism because obviously the hard fights he's been in. Hrgovic is undefeated, he's the IBF next contender. Dempsey McKean is still kind of relatively upcoming, but he's undefeated. Which one of them appeals to you?
Well, if they're looking at Dillian Whyte for AJ, Hrgovic is a bit too much of a risk. And people might think that Chisora's a foregone conclusion. So they're kind of between a rock and a hard place on that one. I think the British fans will be interested in Chisora against AJ because he's never boxed him. And I think a lot of people think that AJ is gun shy and at least Chisora will come out for 4 or 5, 6 rounds and try and put it on him. And there's always that aspect of him, catching him, because that's the only way Chisora fights. Hrgovic, if he's number 1 for Usyk, well, what's he going to make more money? He's going to make more money against AJ, or he's going to make more money against Usyk. He'd probably make more money against AJ, but I suppose they could always use that excuse saying that Hrgovic wanted more money, too much money. And, that's an easy way to get rid of a risk. Oh, we'd love to do that fight, but he was demanding too much money. What the fans want if it's a pay-per-view fight, realistically, Hrgovic is unbeaten, he's a danger man, he's number 1 in the world with the IBF, as you said. That's an interesting, tasty fight. But with only a week to go until the fight, and AJ's been training for he's been training for Dillian Whyte, and Hrgovic has been training for somebody else, it's not really a good idea, for either fighter, really, even though Hrgovic is unbeaten, to kind of change your opponent last minute. It's never a good idea, because you've been training a certain way.
Looking at the styles, I think common sense suggests Derek Chisora's got a similar style to Dillian Whyte. Come forward, aggressive, throws looping shots. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's just whether it's the fans. Do the fans want to see it? Is it going to sell? Is it going to do pay-per-view? That's the way you got to look at it. I think it probably will be an entertaining fight for a couple of rounds. And also, you could use it to measure, Tyson against Chisora. They could look at AJ out, but he's a bit more shot-worn since then. So I think probably that Chisora's going to get the call, and I think that's what's going to happen. I think that's going to be the easiest one to make.
Do you think AJ deserves some respect for the fact that he's willing to fight somebody else as a replacement? Bearing in mind he's got Deontay Wilder fight, which they say is pretty much done for January in Saudi. So him fighting somebody last minute with the prospectus of Deontay Wilder a few months away.
Well, Dillian Whyte, I'd say, is a more live opponent than Chisora. The other thing about Dillian Whyte I was going to say is that, coming back from adversity, he's obviously had these failed drug tests, but, the way he got knocked out against the Russian and came back, getting absolutely slept and then working his way back, you've got to admire him, because AJ has never been in that position. He was in a bad position against the Mexican Ruiz. He was in a tough fight there, and he was on his feet. He never really had the knockout cold shot that Dillian Whyte had. So for Dillian Whyte to actually overcome that takes a lot of mental strength. And that's why I think this fight between Dillian and AJ would have been an interesting fight, because, Dillian's been in a bad situation in that fight, asleep, and he came back from it. And I think it would have probably been a harder fight for AJ, a lot harder fight than the first one. So I think boxing Chisora is actually a step down, and it's an easier fight for AJ, an easier fight. And it doesn't really matter whether he boxes Dillian Whyte or boxes Chisora when Deontay is the next one along. It doesn't really matter. It just means I think AJ is going to have a lot more confidence fighting Chisora than he would against Dillian Whyte.
And then I know, because we haven't spoken in a couple of months, I would just want to quickly touch over some comments that are being made, with AJ's ex-trainers. AJ made some comments about Rob McCracken, and in short, he basically suggested that Rob didn't teach him defence, and the evidence he used was, Carl Froch's nose, and obviously Carl's come back and said some stuff back, and I think Carl's basically nipped it in the bud and said we haven't got any beef, and it's a bit of banter mixed with the fact that he's very loyal to Rob McCracken. What did you make of them comments? Do you think it was more a case of just having a go at Carl Froch, or do you think maybe he wasn't taught defence? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, Carl Froch wasn't the greatest defensive fighter either, but what I can say about fighters like Carl Froch and AJ is that their best form of defence is actually attack. So Carl Froch got tagged a few times, but he kind of fought his way through it. Some fighters, you just can't teach defence, because when they're throwing those big bombs, you do leave yourself open. You can't really throw big bombs and, not get caught coming back. So I think where AJ started with Rob through the amateurs and guided him through the years and years of experience, when a fighter gets to a certain level, it's their responsibility to learn defence. Defence is learned from lots of factors. Having a sparring session with somebody, especially if they're really a live sparring partner, you can't really be trying to do things defence-wise when you're trying to attack as well. So you either go into a session thinking, right, for 6 rounds, I'm going to let this fella come at me. I'm just going to stick a jab out. I'm just going to practice defence. Well, he don't strike me as that kind of fighter, AJ, an intelligent fighter like that. So, because he'd be wanting to get the upper hand in the spar and get off his shots. Now, if you've got AJ and his style is an aggressive come forward style, which it is, imagine if you're a trainer and say, right, AJ, what I want you to do with this fella, you're sparring, or whatever it is, I want you to back off and put your jab out and just practice defence, and that's how you do it, because that's what you've got to do. Rob can't say, well, what I want you to do is 2 rolls to the left and 2 rolls to the right and block this and do that. You say, these are the defence techniques: parrying a shot, slipping a shot, pulling back on a shot, blocking a shot, stepping back off a shot. That's how you work defence. And the rest is, once you're being shown those techniques, is to get into the ring and implement it yourself. Rob's not going to stand behind him, start twisting and turning, whatever. You've got to take the responsibility of the learning yourself. You can be told by a coach, this is how you do defence, and then how we do it in our gym, from when we were kids. When I boxed, I never sparred anybody my own age. So when I was 12 years old open sparring, I didn't spar anybody at 12 years old when we were punching each other in the face. This is what happened. I'd spar somebody at 10 years old, and they'd be trying to hit me in the face, and I'd be just jabbing to the body, and I'd be getting out of the way of the shots. That were me getting punched in the face. Then when I punched somebody in the face, I was sparring somebody a few years older than me, and I was punching them in the face. They were defending themselves. That's what happened. And the first time I had an amateur fight was the first time I actually had a proper fight with somebody, and I won, when we were both the same age and we were both hitting each other in the face at the same time. So if a younger kid's hitting me in the face, it's not going to particularly hurt if I get caught, but I can still practice the shots. Or you do it with a less competent fighter or boxer. That's how you learn defence. So if AJ's sparring live opponents or good sparring partners, is he going to have the confidence to step off and practice that technique? Because that's what it actually entails. That's how you learn defence. Your coach can't tell you. He can tell you the techniques, and then you've got to go in and implement it yourself. So, you know, I know Robert McCracken from a long, long time back as a coach, and, you know, his teaching's basically sound. He's brought loads of kids through, you know, and so not only Anthony Joshua, Cole Froch and others. So his record kind of speaks for itself, and he had a fantastic, you know, career with Cole Froch, and you never ever, even when I was at the fight when Cole Froch got beat by Andre Ward, and in my opinion he kind of got schooled in a way, and you never heard Cole Froch slagging off Ron McCracken. He didn't do this, he didn't do that. He kind of, you know, took it all himself. Like I should have won that fight. It was down to me, and that's where it is. You know, can't take all the glory when you're winning and then put the blame somewhere else when you're losing, can you?
Further on to that, the guys at ID Boxing spoke to Robert Garcia, who's obviously also the former coach of AJ, and he made these comments. I'll just play it to you so you can have a watch.
Fighters come from saying one thing to another, you know. If it was that, if we really had that situation, then the problem is he doesn't have a communication with his management team, because when I first got to camp, I wasn't very happy with what I seen going on in his training camp, and I told his team, fly me home. I don't want to be part of this. I'm not going to be part of this. You guys got to fly me home. And they convinced me to stay. So if that was the case, I think Anthony should have said, let him go, because I don't want to work with him. I don't feel comfortable with him.
Do you think that was put back to Anthony, or do you think that just...
So obviously Robert Garcia's comments there, you saw what he said there. I think similar sort of question to what I asked you. What do you make of what Robert Garcia said? Do you think it's a case of when trainers and fighters split, you know, there's a bit of bad blood and eventually stuff like that leaks out, or do you think this is genuine?
Well, professionalism. You've got to always have a level of professionalism in what you do. And this is the problem with taking on fighters who you don't actually bring through yourself. And you have to be very careful when you take on other fighters. I've had other fighters come to me. Billy Joe Saunders was one, Liam Williams was another, Robbie Davis Jr. was another. And you have to be very, very careful, because obviously Billy Joe Saunders came to me as a world champion. And, a very good fighter, but training-wise, didn't have a clue. And his lifestyle didn't really lend itself to him being an high-level athlete. And the couple of fights he had with me performed really well. You could see where the problems were. But, it's quite easy not to gel with that fighter and to get it wrong. Luckily, it worked there with me, and it worked with Liam Williams for a good 3 years. And with other fighters, it didn't work, because what I find is the fighters who come to you and take everything on board that you're saying, it works. I have had fighters come to me and say, well, what about this and what about that? And I'm like, well, I'm not here to compromise what I do, to why you think you should be doing it. You're the fighter. You know how to fight. And what I'm trying to do is bring the best version of you to the ring. So the little things what you're doing wrong, and you might not be as fit, and you might not be making the weight right, and there might be certain things you do wrong, what need correcting. And I always remember having a conversation with Billy Joe Saunders, and it was in that back room. And he said to me, I'm not being funny, Dominic, but I'm a boxer, and you've never boxed. I was, well, I have boxed. I says, but I'm not doing the boxing, Billy, I'm doing the training. I says, and I think Billy was 28 at the time. I said, if you don't know how to box at 28 years old, you've been doing something wrong. And I pointed to that picture on the wall there with Nazim Hamid, with my dad. I says, when Nazim Hamid boxed there, he'd had a fallout with my dad, and I was 30 years old, and I'd been training fighters properly for 3 years. And I said to Billy, I said, I was 30 years old, training Naz in the world title fight against Wayne McCulloch, and you were 10 years old. I said, so I've got experience of training fighters for 20-odd years. I said, in high level, world title fights, Junior Witter, Johnny Nelson, Nazim Hamid. That was the only fight I actually trained for. But when I trained Nazim Hamid for that fight, it was almost like painting by numbers, because my dad had come in, he'd watch what was going on, and he'd say, right, Dominic, do this, do that, do the other. Because I'd only been training fighters for 3 years. So I come in telling us what to do the pads, do the certain shots. And he boxed with McCulloch and won. And when they fell out, Naz goes, well, you can train me. I went, I can't train you. He goes, well, you trained me for this fight. I goes, no, I didn't. I said, I listened to what my dad told me and just did it, what he told me to do. What? I went, yeah, that's what I did. I said, he watched you and he told me what to do and I just executed it. Because I wasn't arrogant enough or knowledgeable enough to think, oh, I can train Naseem Hamed. I couldn't. And I knew I couldn't. And the trouble with trainers today is there's trainers training fighters who should never be training fighters. But their ego gets the better of them and they think they can. And somebody once said to me, who would you like to train if they came to you? Would you like to train Floyd Mayweather? I says, no, not really, because the way he fights is not really a style I can train. And that's the way he's done it for years and years and years. So how can I improve on that? You've got to know where your level is. And there's certain fighters that you can turn around. I like to think I put Billy Joe Saunders onto the right track. I rejuvenated Liam Williams' career. And they did really well in the time they were with me. There's some fighters you can't do that with. But that's because they're not kind of buying into it or they're not participating properly. So as far as Robert, he's a really good respected trainer. And, you know, I understand exactly where he's coming from. When you walk into a camp, you can't have anybody, you know, AJ's angers on or people who think the trainer's trying to work with him. He can only work on himself and his team. He won't compromise because he knows how he needs things to be done. Now, you know, Robert obviously did the fight. He probably didn't want to do the fight. And, you know, he probably thinks in hindsight, I should have just walked away. AJ should have probably said, well, if that trainer doesn't like what he sees, really, I shouldn't have him train. Shouldn't be having to beg a trainer to train you. There should be the vibe straight away that you've got the respect for each other. And, you know, if you're going to take each other on board, the trainer's going to say, look, this is how I do it. Get rid of all them lot. This is what my system is. You're paying for this.
What I have seen, because obviously AJ's been asked about this sort of stuff before, you know, with the trainer changes, and I think, which is probably a fair comment from him, he's suggested that he's like a sponge and he enjoys soaking up different knowledge from different trainers. He's well documented that he watches a lot of old school boxing. So is it fair, you know, from his point of view, that he basically just wants to gain as much knowledge as he can from different trainers and different...
Well, I'm going to put it a different way, right? This is my personal belief. And I know from experience this happens. I've had fighters, very experienced fighters, say to me before we get in the ring, and this is not, people think Kelbrook, no, it's not Kelbrook, it's other fighters. So what's the plan? Do you understand? Now, when you've been at 20 or 25 fights, you have got to have your own boxing brain as a fighter. Do you understand? You've got to be able to calculate stuff. Because you're the one doing the fighting. The trainer can turn and say, well, I think that's not going to be right. You need maybe make an adjustment, right? And I remember when Scott Quigg boxed Frampton and Joe Gallagher came under a lot of fire in that fight because Scott Quigg thought he was in front and Joe Gallagher didn't give him the advice to step on the gas and start taking it to him. And it was almost like Scott Quigg was clueless, that he couldn't think for himself, and he stuck to whatever Joe Gallagher said to him, and he did. Joe Gallagher said, just stick to this, do that, and he like a robot, he did it. So somebody got it wrong there, but a fighter's got to know to make the adjustments as well. Do you understand? That's got to be the relationship between the coach and the fighter. Now, he might be a sponge and want to absorb everything, but you fight a certain way. Do you understand? How many different styles has Chris Eubank Jr. had? How many trainers has he had? He's tried to box like Roy Jr. He's tried to box like this particular fella. He's had so many trainers. And you can't really say he's got a definitive style. So I know that some fighters would say, well, you know, can you do that for me? Can you show me how to do that? No, you've got to do it yourself. You've got to learn. I can show you, but you've got to practice it. That's what you've got to do. You've got to practice what you're doing. You can't just say, have somebody just saying to you, do it like this, right? You've got to take it on board. You've got to participate, and you can't absorb 10 different styles, can you? You can't. He's a front foot fighter, AJ. He comes forward, so You know, imagine when he boxed Ruiz the second time, it was a very not defence, but really stand-off performance, stand back and just use your jab, play everything dead safe. And even doing that, there was flaws in what he was doing. But it was a very mediocre performance because he just boxed safely through it. He stuck to his very basic boxing. The combination of Ruiz not training properly and partying and, you know, having all this money thrown on him, Orff did the job anyway. He'd already ruined himself before he got into that fight. It wasn't the Ruiz of the second fight wasn't the Ruiz of the first fight. The money had killed him. So I'm not going to buy that, you know, excuse of AJ. Some people have a natural ability to want to learn and work. And I've been around these fighters, Kell Brook, Billy Joe Saunders, Liam Williams. They try different stuff when they're training. You know, like Billy was an exceptional fighter. Could learn everything. So good to watch when he was, you know, when he was fit. His movement. He was like, you know, very fantastic movement. It's like he was born in this gym. The hit and not get hit style. So, you know, but with him, he just needed to be super fit, super conditioned, get his weight down properly, and he boxed $1 million as he did against, you know, the Canadian. So, you know, AJ is the top of his game. You've got to take responsibility for 80% of that learning, implement it, and if realistically, if AJ was that smart, and I'll say this, and this applies to a lot of fighters, there are certain people you would not have around you. You wouldn't have them around you because they kind of hinder what you do. They hinder the trainer.
What do you mean? Do you mean anyone
There's lots of people around. There's lots of people around fighters who should never be there.
Is there anyone specific that
He probably should never have had what they call him, Angel Hernandez, whatever. Like realistically, what was his pedigree before he got involved with AJ? What was, you know, he wasn't a Robert Garcia, was he?
I'm asking you because I know, you know, people, fans will want to know who you're talking about.
People. If somebody's got your ear in boxing, if there's certain people around you, I could look at AJ's camp and I could look at other people's camp thinking, well, you know, why would you have them around you? Yeah? So that's the first thing when you look at the people you surround yourself by in a boxing camp. An example, when I took Kell Brook on training camps, the only people who were around him were me, the nutritionist Greg Marriott, Kid Galahad. That was the team of 4 people. Yeah, the sparring partners came in, but nobody else got into that circle of people. So, same when I trained Liam Williams. So, yeah.
Interesting stuff, Dom. Well, it's still unfolding. Whilst he was talking, I was just checking to see if there's any update, but there's still no update on any opponents. I think Andy Ruiz has chucked his name into the hat as well, but we'll probably find out in the next 24 hours with regards to what actually happens.